G'day friends, welcome to today's video. Now I've got something really exciting to show you. Well, I mean, it's exciting-ish, I guess, because I'm really not going to contextualize what it is just yet. All I'll say is it's for the Creator Box, and I had to recently do mine, so I'll just tell you what it is, because you'll eventually see it, I guess. This little printout here is something that each designer for the Creator Box gets to complete, and it's essentially just a prompt page. Now, the reason I chose to do this is because everyone in the box is different, and just in case you don't know what each designer is about, they would have an opportunity to show you their work, kind of their style, their interpretation, their outlook on themselves, or you know what I mean? Like, kind of stuff like that. You'd get to know them a little bit better based off of whatever they, or however they interpreted this sheet. So, I'm actually really excited to see all of that come together because I have seen all but one of them at this point, and they are truly a reflection of the people that did the sheet. And it kind of caused a little bit of confusion at the start because it is open-ended, but you know, there is this prompt kind of an image going on here. And I wanted to do that because I wanted to start somewhere, but my instructions weren't specific at all. They just said, complete this, do whatever you want with it, do what you would do with it. If that means you would cut everything up, if that means you would just write it all out, if that means you use this to inspire a story, if you use this to make an abstract with, like whatever you wanted to do, you just had to start here. Wherever you ended up would kind of be a reflection of you know, your own personal creativity, which was really exciting to see because these are really interpreted differently, and I think that's just like the best part of what I hoped to achieve with this little creative handout, I think is what I called it. So, we've got one of these. I had to put mine together the other day, and I went through a bit of a journey, a bit of a personal journey. I realized when I was putting mine together, it was actually a lot harder than I thought, but once I got into it, I was very happy about it. So, I decided to draw it out because I love to draw, I love to illustrate, and I thought I'm going to try and draw in the things that I would typically always draw. So, fairies, mermaids, ribbons, leaves, you know, things that are whimsical, loop patterns. I kind of just searched myself for all of those things that I would typically put in my art journaling or my art practices, you know, whatever you want to call it. So this is essentially the sketch that I came out with. Now it does have to be formatted a certain size because this does go into one of the products. It's not necessarily a product, I'll just say this much. It's a zine that goes in the box to break down each designer and show a bit of their work. So that is in there. It's not really one of the products, but it is in there and it's really fun to look at, so I'll just leave you with that. So this is mine. This was my rough sketch of it. It took me a long time to do. I didn't want to labor over it, so I did give myself just the day to do it. I said, you can't go longer than this day. The problem was when I got to this point, I was really, really happy with it, and I thought, well, where do I go from here? It doesn't necessarily look finished, but I am happy with how it looks, but what am I supposed to do? So, like we've been collaborating with ourselves, and I see you, everyone that's been doing it. I have been stalking Instagram for that, and please, let me just be the first to tell you, it has been so exciting to see what you've been doing in your journals. I've absolutely loved it. So thank you for getting on board with that project. This was kind of the same thing. I was like, well, I'm going to photocopy it and I'm going to see what I can do. So I ended up with this photocopy and I thought, should I color it? Should I watercolor it? How should I approach, you know, finishing this? Because there's so many ways you could render something and actually finish it. And I love to do so many different things. Like I might want to watercolor the whole thing, do it all in ink. I might want to do it in Copic markers, maybe just colored pencils, gel pens, a mixture of everything together, gouache, like acrylic, who knows? Depending on what day it is, I'm going to change my mind. So I actually just decided, you know what, I'm going to do it with pencil. I started, a lot of the time I like to say all you really need is a pencil, so I just used pencil. I used my, you're gonna die at this, I used my Ticonderoga #2 pencil. This is like a school pencil. It's just an HB pencil that I've had literally for so many years. Now it's in a little pencil extender. I don't know what it is, I really enjoy these. I love my Palomino Blackwings too. I find they're a little soft and they get very smudgy, so I typically like to use an HB pencil, and this one it just works really nicely. I did it also with my Pilot OPT 0.5, which I have a #2 lead in. I believe it's a Pentel #2 lead, or little stick insert. What do you call those things? Mechanical insert refill thing. It's a #2. So it's very dark. And the 0.5, obviously it's a much finer tip to go with this. So combining both of these, I could get a lot of dynamic, you know, shifts in the line weight, which is also a really effective technique when you're illustrating, and I could get a lot of different, shading going on. I could cover larger areas and get a softer shading with this, and I could cover finer details and really tighten up edges and stuff with this. So this is a great combo to use. And what I ended up with was this. Now, I couldn't be more obsessed with this. It's a rare day when I actually give myself a long time. And I say a day is a long time because, to be honest, it really is. The way I've scheduled all of my projects and my work, to give myself more than a few hours on something, that's a huge deal because I've got too many other things that need time and attention too. So to give myself a full day to complete this was, it seemed like a lot. In hindsight, I realized that that's just not a lot of time at all, but that's what it felt like for me. So it was a big project in my head, but I absolutely adore how this turned out. The shading took me a long time to do. I was doing it for hours. I had RSI all through my hand. I was massaging out my shoulder and doing my arm exercises, because something like this, I mean, when you're sitting down and you're going at it so slowly and so methodically over and over and over again, it can just be, it can actually start to take a physical toll on your body. And this isn't the only work I've been doing, so all of the other stuff combined with how much I was working on this, I think I don't know, my body was just like, can I have a break for a second? And I said, no, I'm gonna finish. So I did, I finished, and I was really excited with it. All of that to say, I was so scared to actually go in and shade it, because even at this point I thought, what if I want to watercolor it? I had scanned it before I started, so that way I always had like an option to reprint it and start again, and that's kind of where I'm getting to today. When I don't know if I want to go forward with something, and I do have an expectation on how it will turn out, and I do really want to commit to doing the best job that I can do, like I have an idea for it, I want to make sure that I've got options, I'll scan it. And scanning isn't something that everyone needs to do. I mean, photocopying is kind of the same thing, except with scanning you've got a lot more of an opportunity to work digitally with it. Even though I don't love working digitally, the thing that I love about scanning is that I do have access to that original source image, and I can do stuff with it. Whether that's make digi-stamps or collage sheets, or, put them into PDFs and, use them around the border of the playtest press issues. Like, I always scan the stuff, and just in case also the cats go and find it and, eat it or sit on it, because those are the two things they love to do with lots of the loose papers that fly around my studio. So always scanning, always reinterpreting. You'll see this in the zine if you do decide to get on the creator box. The release date for the pre-order is still TBD. I'm hoping to have it up by the end of September. This is all a secret for now. I haven't publicly mentioned who the designers are. I still haven't publicly mentioned any of that stuff. All I've seen is a logo, which doesn't explain a lot. So, taking the scan, luckily I didn't need it, because I did end up loving how this looked, and I'm just really obsessed with this. But taking the scan, should this not have worked out, what would have been my next step, right? I would print it out and start again. I have done this before. It's not often that I'll do it, because I will just try and rework or work with the mistakes to try and get a result that I can get down with. But just in case, I would reprint it and I would start again, and I don't think there's any problem with that, especially if you're using work that you have drawn. I don't really see it as cheating to print it out and start again. Some people would tell you that's cheating, but I don't really care. Even if it was cheating, then guess what? I'm cheating. So I took this and I wanted to color it the other ways today. I wanted to, because I did want to do it in watercolor, I wanted to see it in watercolor today. I will also want to see it maybe in some mixed media, or maybe I'll just do it in ink. I don't know. I've got 4 options to try. So far I've only put 2 on the board. That's just to keep them flat, because I'm going to use some wet media with it. I don't know if I'll get around to all 4, but I do at least want to try the watercolor. And I wanted to capture that on camera for you, just to see that, reworking with stuff that you're proud of, reworking with ideas that you've enjoyed before, can take on a new life of their own anyway. As it is, I took the file, I took the bow off, I took the ribbons off because it was too hard to keep them on the file. They didn't connect. There was no finish to the ribbons. They do go off the page. So I could have kept the bow, I guess, but I just liked it without the bow as I was reinterpreting it. I took the file, I flipped it, and then I erased whatever parts I didn't want to cross over. So now it essentially looks like I've got 2 of them kind of, 2 facing each other, but also facing out. But, then I've got the symmetry of the wings as well. So it's not a perfectly symmetrical image, but it has the visual impact of something being symmetrical. That's the kind of symmetry that I really like. I don't like it to be perfectly symmetrical. I like it to be just different enough, but have the impact of symmetry. So we're going to work with this today. We're going to color these in. I'm going to have a fabulous time. Coloring in is one of the things that I have probably done the longest, overdrawing, because once upon a time, a quarter century ago, I was a child and I loved to color in. I had many, many coloring in books. Lots of them were fairies and mermaids. It's just kind of where I started and where I never left. So I would color in all the time, every holiday, every afternoon after school, every chance I got. I mean, even in class, like, it didn't matter. I was always kind of coloring in, doodling. Eventually moved in towards drawing because I wanted to draw my own things that I could color in, but the coloring, the rendering of it, bringing it to life with a lot of that texture and the pattern and the color and all of that, just that really, really excites me. So today I just want to dive into that process with you. I'm going to jump up into a voiceover and speak through some of my thoughts as I show the coloring process, or the rendering process, I should say, because I think I will use ink as well. I'm nervous about that one. I don't really know how that's going to work. Oh, and I should say, this is Canson 300 GSM watercolor paper. I cut it down to a US letter size and just feed it through my printer. I know it's probably not the best for my printer, considering I keep breaking them, but I, touch wood, I haven't had much of a problem feeding this through, as long as I give it a good bit of a bend so that the feeder can catch it. And I've printed it on the back. I don't want all of the, I mean, there's not a huge difference between the front and the back, but it is more textured on the front. And so I wanted a flatter texture, so I do print it on the back of this cold press paper. But I did just print this out. As with anything you print on an inkjet printer, that is ink on your paper and it is water reactive. So whatever you know about using ink, like if you used a pen that was water reactive, this is going to act the same way. So that's why I've kind of printed it in red, because it will blend if I choose to do any kind of skin tones or, you know, pinks or something. It will just, if it does react, which it will kind of blend in and it won't be so much of a problem. Sometimes it is, sometimes you've got these heavier areas of dark ink that are just kind of hanging around your page. It will start to get a little messy. In an ideal world, if I wasn't filming, I would print this a lot lighter, so you could probably barely see it. Only, you know, me sitting right here could see it. But I do want to make sure that you can at least see some of the outlines I'm working with. Otherwise, you might just be watching nothing come to life over a really long period of time. That might be quite boring. I'm not quite sure. And I did just want to make sure you could see some of what I'm working with today. So I printed it a little darker than I normally would. But that's the journey. This is where we ended up. A little digital flip of the image. I love that even though it's digital, because I did it on the computer, it's still my drawing. It still has all of the charm of the sketch. I haven't worked on it digitally. I've just reformatted it digitally. That's kind of the extent of what I like to do in the digital process. This is where we got it from, this image here. I actually got it from before I scanned this. Obviously there's no patterning and shading on these. This was from the scan I took before I actually etched in all this shading. It came from the photocopy where we were testing what I wanted to finish it with. It came from this sketch, which came from this prompt. I will just keep reinterpreting this. If I like what happens here, you will most likely see it in a PDF digital download for you. Because that's what I do. I just keep reinterpreting until I move on from the idea and I want to start something else and reinterpret that 50 million times. Perpetually collaborating with myself and my former ideas, which is essentially what everyone does anyway. I just like to be a lot more analytical about the process for some reason. I don't know if it really helps at all, to be honest. I think it just helps me because that's the way I am. All right, enough chat for me here. I'll speak to you in the voiceover in a second. G'day voiceover! Okay, so let's just get right into something I don't think I clarified when I first started. The video is about curiosity. It's about the what if. As I was editing, I should say, together the first part, I thought I never explained why I was doing this video, and there is a point to it. It's not just watching me color in today, even though that's just fine, I'm sure, but I did put this video together because throughout many processes when I'm designing products or having a fun time in my art journal or I'm looking to practice something or, you know, throughout most of these practices I end up with a lot of questions, and that question is always just what if? What if I did that? What if I spent more time on that? What if I used watercolor? What if I used different colors? What if I did... There's just a perpetual what if going on in my head, and the thing is that I just think that's a great thing. Sometimes it can be annoying, I'm not going to lie, but I think it is essential to growth. I think one of the biggest, foundations of any kind of innovation that we've had ever, really, is a curiosity to ask what if it changed in some way. it seems to be like the very fundamental idea behind innovating and growing. Not just mixed media, I'm not talking about artists, I'm not even talking about myself here, because heaven knows I am very resistant to a lot of change, so I would not be so bold as to say that I have a good grasp on it. There are times, like in this video, that I do lean into it, and there are a lot of other times where I do try my best. But I'm more talking about things like, if you think about, the thing that pops to my head the first is the iPod. There was already something you could carry around as a portable, music player. You had the Discman or the Walkman, whatever, I forget what it was called. You know what I'm talking about. You could carry those around, so there was, some kind of portable music for you. My family used to just carry around the boombox and put it in the car. But someone at Apple, presumably Steve Jobs, who knows, said, what if we didn't have to carry around all the CDs? Like, how could we do that? And it's not even really Apple. To be fair, Apple weren't the first people to make MP3 players. My point is, through asking those questions, what if we did this? What if we could do that? What if we could do this? You end up growing, you end up innovating, you end up asking yourself more questions. The process never really ends. You just keep asking and asking and asking until those questions kind of run out. And those questions might lead you in a completely different direction. I mean, to be fair, at one point, everyone at Apple was just asking, what if we had a touchscreen for this iPod? What if the click wheel was different? What if we could bring the album artwork onto the screen and, people could see that? Eventually it just led to the iPhone. And no one was really asking questions about the iPod anymore, because no one really wanted the iPod anymore. No one really needed it. You had the iPod and a phone in your pocket. So I think the point is, curiosity is a really fantastic thing to lean into. I think chasing down all of those what ifs, those creative frenzies that you have in your mind that bubble over, that make you question everything about your process in a good way, in a constructive way. Not like, what if I was just better and now I hate myself? And, that's not the productive kind of questioning that leads to any kind of growth. I think that's quite the opposite. I think it stagnates a lot of people to think that way. But the curiosity is as if, like, for example, this video, I had already done the piece. Like, I'd already done the work I needed to do for that zine. I didn't need to do it again. But I was curious. I did want to know, since I had the idea originally to do it in watercolor, what would it have looked like in watercolor? Did I miss an opportunity there? Would it look better? Should I go back and do it again? Because in the effort to try and do my best and put my best foot forward, I had a question that I hadn't answered to myself, and I needed to know. Maybe that's crazy, I don't know. I'm very lucky that, the hours of my day are set aside for questions like this, but, and I know that's not typical, but, so I wanted to lean into it anyway, and if anything, it would be a good chance just to color in and play, which is what I like to do anyway, so it was great. And I made this video, so, really did kill a lot of birds with a pebble. I ended up going through the process and realizing that I didn't love the way that I watercolored it over the way that I did shade it in with graphite pencils. That even through the process of doing all of these, I really quite enjoyed each one of these that I did. I did 3 of them in total, but I didn't love any of them more than what I had already done. And I don't really know how I'll move forward with any of these, but I know this much about myself: if I've liked something, there is 100% probability that I will bring it back in some way. And since I really liked these, I don't know what's going to happen with them, but you could probably expect to see them again somehow. Because that's just the way it is. And so, there's a lot of benefit to the process. I think the best thing that you can get out of it is leaning into that curiosity and eventually growing through that questioning and through that process. And the worst thing that you're going to do is have fun. You know what I mean? You'll have fun with the process. So I really do encourage you to lean into some of those questions you have for yourself. And if you do have the time to explore them a little bit, just to go there, just to see that you don't need to achieve anything. Even better if you don't need to. I wouldn't really recommend diving into your curiosities if you have a project you have to complete. There's a lot of safety net in the fact that I'd already done a good job with my first one, so I didn't need to fix it. But if I had to fix it, I probably wouldn't have gone through this process. I would have just actually tried to do what I needed to do, and it wouldn't have been so experimental. It wouldn't have been, let's just try all the mediums, let's have fun with all of them. I would have been very laser focused on the task at hand. So It's a bit of a different process to try and get your head into sometimes, but I think it really is beneficial in helping you grow. So the first piece I did was the watercolor, then I moved off to the ink. So I'm going to give you a bit of a play-by-play, just a few of the things that I noticed as I was working, just if they might be helpful to you, I'm not quite sure. But the first one I did was the watercolor, I let it dry, then I went to the ink. The ink was very much approached in every way I've done every Inktober piece. And I used the same Sumie Japanese calligraphy ink that I got from the Daiso. It's $1.50 at the Daiso, but it is linked in my Amazon storefront, and I believe it's about $6 or $7 on Amazon. So if you can get to the Daiso, I'd recommend picking a bottle of that up there. But you could check the Amazon link to see what the bottle looks like, because I don't know how to pronounce the brand name. So just go and check that. It's got a little yellow lid. It's super great. It dries matte. It dries black, like a really rich black. It works really well with all these blooms and blossoms. Like, it's a fantastic ink. I really, really love it. And it's waterproof once it's dry. So it's really layerable, and you can get a lot of those transparent washes that layer on top of each other, which is fantastic. I do have some of that ink watered down in a water brush, a detailer water brush. And I really like that for putting shadows on. I think I said this in the Devil Wears Prada sketch flicks, but you can use it, and then once it's dry, you can layer over it again, and it will get darker because it is that transparent waterproof ink. It's not going to reactivate what's underneath it once it's dry. It will layer on top, and it will create a darker layer. So you can actually build it up quite intense through a water brush. But I just have it watered down a lot, just so I can start with light shadows and make them darker if I want to. So I really, really like that ink. I will not be doing Inktober this year, so I'm going to consider that last piece my one and only Inktober piece. No, it's fine. I'll still probably use the ink because it's great. It's a great ink to use. But one thing I do know about it, if you layer it on quite thick, like in its pure black state, it will dry. The first part of that ink will sink into the substrate, will sink into the paper. Whatever dries on top, like that isn't fully sunken in, will reactivate with water. So you want to use the ink not sparingly, but don't let it get really thick on top of the paper. Otherwise, it won't be as waterproof as you probably want it to be. The next thing that I moved on to was the watercolor, which is just very much the way that I like to do any kind of watercolor. Very, very loose, lots and lots and lots of water. I was being a bit more experimental with flicking paint on it, and I was also spritzing it and kind of doing a wash over it, like glazing over the top of everything. I was just curious to see how far I could push it. The thing that I don't like about pushing watercolor is that it can often, you can go like with lots of water and lots of color, but it can actually look very dull and muted at the end. So if you look at the top part of that piece, can you see how it almost looks stained and muted and dull instead of rich and vibrant and textured? I'd be looking for the adjectives of the second part of that explanation. Do you know what I mean? Like, I really don't enjoy the look of that. But it's not the end of the world because it is just a part of the background. If I wanted to finish this, in a way that I think I would, absolutely love it, I probably would just draw something over the top of that area or paint over the top of that area so that a lot of that would disappear and really recede into the background. But it's fine for this. It's just a part of the background. The other thing that I liked is what I'm doing right here on the screen with the Uniball Signo white gel pen. I didn't want to outline everything, but I do like to tighten up some of that detail and crisp up a lot of the edges. So I decided to grab that white gel pen and just lightly run over the edge, kind of flick it off, because I thought I could achieve like a really fine point to that line, because it is quite a thick ballpoint. But even then, it just wasn't as fine as I wanted. So I just grabbed my finger and then rubbed it over the end, and it kind of blended into the watercolor. The watercolor was dry at that point, so you are just kind of shearing out the white gel ink over the watercolor, but it does look like a really soft blend from, stark white into a soft transition that blends away to nothing. One of my favorite parts was flicking all of that metallic watercolor over everything. I lost my full fantasy here. I went right into it. I went and got the Manhattan watercolor designs by Rachel Beth, and I just put that over everything. It has this beautiful sparkle to it, and then obviously flicking all of that rose gold watercolor. That was handmade by a friend. But there's also the copper candles you can see up in the watercolor pan there. I've got both of them in there because they are different. I know they look the same. The rose gold is a cool tone, like very light kind of a copper, and then the copper candles is a strong kind of like warm copper candle, copper color. Favorite part, peeling off the tape. I do love a good bit of Blue Painter's tape, I'll have to say. I just really love a crisp white edge. I think it really makes it all look neat, and I'm not afraid to put that tape in my journal as well. So if you are going to do any of this in your journaling, you grab some painter's tape. It'll look really, really finished. Even if it's not good, you could just throw watercolor all over the page. As long as it's masked off, it'll look like a piece of art. Like it looks great. I love a good crisp border. Sometimes, I guess. I go through phases. It's usually when I'm doing Inktober or Mermaid or something, I get that Blue Painter's tape out. Apparently my finished pieces need Blue Painter's tape for them to feel real to me. I don't know what that is. The last piece that I'm doing is the Copic marker, and I've used gel pens and pencils, so technically it's just a lot of mixed media. I mean, most of these have been mixed media at this point, let's be real. But this one I really love the effect of, because alcohol marker specifically, not water-based markers in fact, but alcohol markers, if you do work them very saturated into each other, they get a really soft blend of color, like a really nice gradient, but they're also very flat looking, which is nice because it's really hard to achieve a really flat lay of color with any kind of medium, unless you have a great skill with acrylic or gouache. I certainly don't, so the alcohol markers really make it easy for me, and I have a lot more dexterity with a marker than I do with a paintbrush. So coloring that in first, putting a base layer down, but then going over the top of it with pencils, it's a nice contrast between the flat nature of the alcohol marker and then the texture of the pencil, especially if you're working on a watercolor paper. This is the back of the Canson watercolor paper, the cold press, so the tooth is a lot finer. It's not a big, heavy, rough tooth, even though on the front it's not that textured, but on the back it's just less so. So it will still pick up with the pencil though, and if there is more tooth to the paper, more of that texture, the pencil will have a lot more textured of a look. So you'll notice this if you run your pencil over a piece of printer paper, like a piece of copy paper, and then run your pencil over a piece of watercolor paper, you'll see the difference in how that texture picks up. So for me, I just really love the flat look of the Copic marker, and then layered on top with the textured look of the pencil. I just think that looks really pretty. It's a nice contrast. So I did go through all of this and kind of just work very, very plain with it. Plain in the sense that I wasn't trying to really work outside of the boundaries of coloring. You know what I mean? Like, I wasn't trying to reinvent anything here. I just wanted to color it in, which is just a guilty pastime of mine. Like, it's a guilty pleasure. I love to color in. I could color the same thing in over and over and over again. I chose my favorite medium deep skin tone for these. I do love to always mention this because I know it can be quite a nightmare to try and find alternatives for the deeper skin tones that a lot of companies love to offer in portrait sets that just don't seem to work very well. So this color is light walnut. I think it's a beautiful color that is rich and works really well to highlight with those more olive and yellow undertones. So I think that brings a lot of vibrancy. And you can see I actually did use that mustard pencil to highlight a little bit. I didn't go crazy with the highlighting because I did want to go for a bit more of a colorful highlight. So I did put a lot of purple in the shadow areas, and then I'll go over and put a vibrant turquoise, kind of lining a lot of the image with the turquoise as if there was like a fluorescent turquoise light. That's something that I'm kind of getting into. I'm not even going to say I'm getting into. I've been learning more about it, but I just don't care to do it with any kind of realism. If you did my, if you've done my whimsical illustration course, I've said this in there, but I don't work with shadows in any kind of realistic way. I just choose where I want them, and I kind of remap them out the same place every single time. Sometimes I'll choose a light source, but it is so rare that I wouldn't say that that's what I do. I'll just pick where the shadows are going to go and where the highlights are going to go, and I'll just go with it. And that's how I like to do it. So if you actually tried to determine where the light source was coming from, you'd realize it's not coming from anywhere. It's just the way I've chosen to do it. But I find that it works most times. Most times I haven't had a problem with it. I'm just saying that just in case you are someone that picks up and thinks like, does he know that the shadows are in the wrong place? I absolutely do. It's a personal choice. call it lazy because I cannot be bothered trying to find the light source for every single image I do. Anyway, these are the final pieces. I had a fantastic time. Please go and check the PDF out for a closer look at some of the stuff here, especially how I end up lining a lot of this stuff, because you'll notice that a lot of these are kind of lined, but the lines are missing. They're not fully outlined, they're just tightened up or neatened up in certain areas, and I find that that brings an overall nice sharpness to the image, even though it can be quite loose and colored with a lot of like textured mediums. All right, that's it from me. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you again very soon. Until then, bye.
Try to cut a pine tree down.